Hi, Carolyn.
Hi, how are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm so excited to be here.
I am so happy that you're here. We met through the amazing community Pregnantish,
hmm
and you have a very fascinating story, which we're going to get into. But I was like, I have to have you on my podcast. And you were like, really? So surprised. And I was like, are you kidding? You have so much to share. So thank you for
Oh,
being here.
thank you for inviting me. Yeah, it's not your every day that someone's like, be a guest on my podcast. So I was totally floored and I'm really happy that we're here today.
Me too. So why don't we start with how you ended up at the Pregnantish community and maybe sort of what you learned as you were working with and for them.
Totally. Oh yeah, so happy to talk about Pregnantish. It's been an incredible team to be a part of. So my background is academically in gender studies. I got my bachelor's in gender studies, then went on to get my master's. And in both, I really focused my research on assisted reproductive technology. A lot of people have been like, how did you know to look into that?
Yeah.
And the real answer there is that I grew up in a household of doctors who are women. My mom is a primary care physician. My sister is also a primary care physician. And so I've been around talk about medicine and the nexus of gender and reproductive and sexual health for a long time. And so when I started doing research, that was my immediate passion area. Um, and so coming out of my master's, I was abroad for that in London. I moved back to the tri-state area. I'm originally from New Jersey, so not too far from home to be now here in New York. Um, and after a few years of sort of working in the nonprofit field, I moved out of that and started working for myself with Cucumber Communications. That's my current role and business. And about 3.5 years ago, in that, a great colleague and honestly friend at this point and mentor, Stephanie Perez, connected me with Andrea Sertash at Pregnantish. She said, you two are going to be a match made in heaven. Andrea has been running Pregnantish at the time. It had been about 5 years. Pregnantish's whole mission is around amplifying storytelling and changing the conversation, elevating the conversation around infertility. And with my subject matter expertise in assisted reproductive technology, and then also my professional skill set in communications, Steph was like, "You guys, you got to connect." And so we did. And 3.5 years later, it's been an incredible journey. So when you and I met in our in LA in March, that was Pregnantish's Reality of Infertility event, one of the many events that I help produce and work in the back end for Pregnantish. So that was a great spot to meet you, and it's been an incredible journey with Pregnantish.
Love it. And so Pregnantish is like one of your clients. You have several and you do communications in other arenas. Do you have others that are as sort of tailored to your niche?
Great question. Yes, is the short answer in terms of do I have other clients? I work sort of day in and day out with three. Pregnantish is definitely the one that is most niche for my, most connected to
Sure.
my background. The other two, though, focus a lot more on sexual health and sexuality. So part of my gender studies background is also in gender identity and sexuality, and understanding systems of power and how they affect marginalized groups from a health perspective, but also from a gender perspective and a sexuality perspective. Um, so Pregnantish is definitely the most overlap with what I researched by far, and the other two groups are also based in New York, and yeah, hit on topics and issues that are very close to home for me.
Amazing. So one of the things that was extremely fascinating about you when I heard you speak in a panel, you were fantastic,
Thank you.
that you're very open about your polyamory.
Mhm.
And I want to know everything about this. I assume so many people also want to know everything about
Yes.
this. So maybe let's start there. At what point does one realize this is something they would like, a lifestyle they would like to become a part of? Or at least, how was
Yeah.
that for you?
Yeah, that's a great question because it is definitely different for everyone. Um, a lot of people, I'll start from a bird's eye view. There are a lot of people who view non-monogamy, sometimes known as ethical non-monogamy or consensual non-monogamy, um, and or polyamory as a structure. So just like monogamy is a relationship structure, it's, oh, I lost my headphone. Sorry.
It's okay.
I'll start that over.
Okay,
So
perfect.
yeah, just like monogamy can be a relationship structure, so can non-monogamy or polyamory. In that sense, it is simply a choice. It is something you are doing. Um, Versus non-monogamy or polyamory or monogamy as more of an identity. I fall more into the identity category. And what I mean by that is I've known I was, bisexual, pan, queer, all the above apply to me. Honestly, probably since I was around 12. And I did not have the vocabulary for polyamory at all back then. But if you look back at my life, and my parents know I'm poly. They've been incredible advocates and allies and celebrators over the years, which is not something everyone can say. I'm incredibly grateful for that. When I've had conversations with them that are honestly pretty humorous at this point, we look back on my youth and they are able to also sort of apply this knowing lens, saying, you were asking questions about monogamy, you were expressing interest in multiple people from a really young age. Again, not that's not the case for everybody, but for me, it really feels like an extension of my sexuality. I identify as queer. I also identify as poly. As I'm saying, a lot, everyone does it differently. There are also a lot of people I know who don't really see it as an identity that's like really intrinsic to their being. They see it more as a choice, as I said, something that is not necessarily a wiring, but something they're open to, something they maybe practice, but it's not as integral as something like sexuality. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, yeah. So as you start as a teenager, you start to explore your sexuality. You went to
Mm-hmm.
college. How did you navigate this in terms of, right, we don't have the vocabulary at 12,
Mm-hmm.
but you had the feelings. So
Yes.
was there any like high school relationship and did you
Mm-hmm.
stay monogamous in that? And did that feel weird to you? How did it sort of unfold for you?
Yeah.
And we can go from
Great
there.
question. Yeah. So for me, as I was sort of citing, there were definitely these moments, and bubbling experiences and feelings that I was having that I didn't act on, so to speak, because um, you may have heard the term mononormativity or heteronormativity. So heteronormativity is the one that's more commonly understood. It's the idea that in society we are very much taught that being heterosexual is the only way. It's the silver platter, it's served on a silver platter. Mononormativity is the same idea. It's that, we grow up and from society and school and everywhere, we learn that you are meant to be with the one person. Um, so for me, I didn't act on any of those feelings of multiplicity because that was frankly just seen as wrong, taboo, that I was, you can insert a ton of stigmas like cheating, a lot of derogatory terms you could insert there. Um, but I did have all those feelings. I guess first time that really came up in a very salient way um, was with, yeah, I did have sort of a high school sweetheart, and I went off to college a year before him, and we tried an open relationship for a few months, sort of on the pretense of, well, we're not going to be in the same state anymore. We still love each other, though. What could this look like? Um, and we totally messed it up, as so many people do. We had no vocabulary, we had no structure, no community. So that kind of crashed and burned pretty quickly. But that was sort of the first time I tried to explore it in any sort of intentional way. And after that, maintained monogamous relationships long term for a while. And it wasn't until I was sort of finishing my master's that it really came to a head for me, where I had both the sort of intrinsic feeling and also the language now to back it up, and the knowledge to say, what, this is me moving forward. I'm going to pursue this. I'm going to seek relationships, friends, community with people who are either, non-monogamy curious or people who have been practicing polyamory for many years. And that's exactly what I did. So that was about 5 years ago. And I mentioned I'm in New York. I'm based in Brooklyn. That is more or less the mecca of poly people. There are a couple other hotspots around the globe, but I could not be luckier to be in the city that I'm in. And in particular, the borough that I'm in, with just the sheer amount. There's thousands of us, and it's
So
been
awesome.
an incredibly life affirming experience.
Did you have any sort of coming out to your family of like, this is how I'm now going to be, or did it feel just part of your normalcy?
Another great question. For me, I had a little bit of an unusual situation. A lot of the people I know who are poly, in my world have, if they've come out at all, whether that's family, friends, colleagues, it's been more organic in the sense of maybe they are for the first time dating multiple people seriously. And so instead of coming home or coming out, let's say they're going home for the holidays, they're saying, hey, I'm bringing not one, but two partners now. And there's sort of a reckoning of that that's happening live. For me, I had actually been in a very serious monogamous relationship for about 4 years that in that last year, it was during grad school, I was really coming to terms with this identity for myself. And I am very close with my biological family. So they were hearing the questions, the doubts, the curiosities, the research along the way, even before I officially sort of took that identity label on. That's the part that is really unusual. I am so privileged to have a bio family that is very,
Supportive.
very open-minded,
Yeah.
supportive, curious, bright, intellectual. There are a ton of people where that's not the case, where, you go through this experience and you are not able to share those questions. So for me, the coming out was more of a process. It wasn't like hey, let's sit down. I have something to tell you. Um, and once I broke up with that, monogamous ex, I took about 6 months to really, if it's not obvious, I'm quite nerdy about this stuff. Like do the literature review,
Mhm.
do a lot of research, get a sense of the vocabulary, so I'm not walking in blind. I can really, when I'm looking for community, when I'm looking for partners, have that intentionality behind me. And so my family was along for that ride, for better or for worse. They really heard about those first dates that I had and all the pieces I was learning about. So yeah, it really, the coming out was a process.
So let's talk about what happens when you say to your family, I am going to bring two partners to Thanksgiving.
Hmm.
I think from a very heteronormative upbringing and life, um, I'm like, what do they feel? Don't they feel like, do they both get equal attention? I think these are some of the like I'm so grateful to be able to ask you some of the questions that we
Yeah,
all are thinking
yeah,
sometimes. Like, what do you mean you're
sure.
bringing two partners to Thanksgiving?
Hmm.
Are they partners with each other too, or are they only partners with you? And how do you figure out whose time goes where? And do you all live
Yeah,
together? And how do you figure out who
yeah,
stays over which night? And right, like the
totally.
logistics of it. I know it seems silly, but I think a lot of
No,
times
it's not.
that is what we're like, I couldn't even, I can barely even handle one partner, let alone two,
Yes.
right? Like, so
Yeah.
how do the logistics sort of play out? And I know that you're not speaking for every polyamorous person out
Hmm.
there, but in your life and from your close people, how do you see it play out?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's kind of a common joke or trope that the number one skill that is needed to successfully live a poly or non-monogamous life is Google Calendar. And it is completely accurate. I've shared calendars with both of my partners. I appreciate the disclaimer that I'm not speaking for everyone. The reason that's also important to say is because everyone really does it differently. It's so interesting. If this was a panel and there were even three, four, not that many people on this call, you would hear completely different answers. So you are talking to someone who is very traditionally poly in the sense of I have two partners I am fully in love with. A lot of people, probably more of the majority that I um, see or representation I see in Brooklyn is a lot of quite hierarchical partnerships where you have an anchor partner or a nesting partner, someone you live with, someone is more or less your primary, and then you have other partners that maybe are not at that echelon of integration. And whether that's just because of capacity and time, or maybe it's just about interest, it differs from person to person. But for me, um, those conversations regarding, how is time spent? How is it equal? Is it equitable? Those are conversations that, I have from anyone that I'm dating. I have with anyone that I'm dating from the jump. So for my life at this, I'll speak in the present day, though I will say this has changed over the years. I have a partner, Aaron, who I've been with 4.5 years, and we are descriptively primary. He is my primary. We spend a ton of our time together. We are very integrated. And when I say integrated, I mean, we know each other's bio families, we spend holidays together, we are now moving in together. Um, we are best friends. It's any monogamous person, if they didn't know we were poly, would think that we were monogamous, and we're very in love. I also have another partner. I'm not going to use her name because I don't know if she's comfortable with that. I should have asked her, but
Okay.
and she is married and she has a kid, and so she is in a primary relationship, a nesting relationship as well. So there is this inherent balance to our polycule where I have my primary, she has her primary. She and I spend a significant amount of time together, but it's inherently less than the partners that we live with. And that works for us both. That could ebb and flow. We could grow that relationship. We could de escalate it, though neither of us want to. Um, and she and I have been together going on 2 years. So it is equitable, it's not equal. I think anyone who says that they have equal partnerships across the board is probably kidding themselves. Unless they are, financially privileged enough that they don't have to work. That would be cool. I always joke that if I didn't have a job and didn't have to pay bills, I'd have like 7 wives. Not the case though. We all,
Which would
there are
mean
only
you
so
would need to work and pay bills even more than
exactly,
it's like.
exactly. But there are only so many hours in the day. And
Mhm.
the way that I liken that as well is, if you are monogamous and you're hearing this being like, oh, I could never, like, think about your friendships, think about maybe your biological family. How do you allocate your time to those relationships? Before I was poly, I still I have a chosen family in some of my friendships, people who are not poly. And we put a ton of time and effort and commitment into those friendships. And you sort of dial time with them up or you dial them down just depending on your life circumstances. It's really no different. It's just you're adding the element of romance and intimacy into it when, with platonic friendships, you're not. But it's that same skill set of being mindful of people's feelings, having really transparent communication about people's needs and their time. And, it's trading in one set of problems in monogamy for another set of problems in non-monogamy.
Is there any time a scenario where everyone hangs out together, one big happy?
All the time.
Okay.
In
And
my life,
that's
all the
and
time.
in your life. And for your two people, that's comfortable and sort of wanted.
Yes, very much so. So I know I'm throwing a lot of terms out there, but there's one structure of polyamory called kitchen table polyamory, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's sort of this theory or practice of multiple poly people, who are connected, whether they're dating, whether they're metamors, metamor meaning it's your partner's partner, and everyone sits around the table, literally or metaphorically speaking, and everyone is able to be seen and heard. So it doesn't necessarily mean, you can't force a friendship. My two partners happen to really love each other and they don't date, but they are very solid metamors. They're good friends. They spend a lot of time together. My birthday's coming up. They're both planning that. And it's the same for me in reverse. My girlfriend's husband is a really close friend of mine. He and I just threw her birthday party recently. We do hang out as a polycule pretty regularly. Um, we set intentional time for that group space, and those are some of the most special, coveted spaces. But as I'm saying, not everyone does that. There are a lot of people who practice what's called parallel polyamory or parallel non-monogamy, where you may have multiple partners, but they don't necessarily intersect. Maybe they live in different cities, or maybe they just don't want to. Maybe they are more interested in, having a cordial relationship, but not actually getting super integrated. And there's no wrong or right way to do it. But for us and for me, the kitchen table element is for all of my partners and our polycule. It's a non-negotiable, and it's definitely it's a way of being that is I have found to be a lot more successful and fruitful in my life than parallel.
Hmm. And does your girlfriend ever, I know she's not your primary, does she ever spend time with your biological family?
She does, yeah.
Okay.
They have
And
met.
vice versa. So this is like very open for you guys.
Not so. I'm the only one in my polycule who is out
Okay.
to their biological family. As I said, it is incredibly rare. Most people and their families there's so much phobia around queerness, as people are familiar with. There's also a lot of phobia around polyamory, as you may imagine.
Which is why I'm so
So
grateful you're destigmatizing this for us today. Thank you.
thank you. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
thank you for the platform,
Yeah.
honestly. So yeah, I do have the privilege of being able to get on this call with you, have speaking opportunities, that kind of thing, because, everyone in my life I'm able to safely come out to. That is not the case for any of my partners.
Okay.
Um, so it is what it
It
is,
is what it is.
and that may change over time, but at least since I've known them, it would not be safe to come out in that way. So though I have met their families, it's been in a very different capacity. I've
Sure.
been either a friend or, for Aaron, his family knows that I am who I am,
Okay.
and that I'm his partner. But for the rest of the QL, yeah, that's not the case. And that is when I think about the sort of circles I run in Brooklyn in the poly scene, I'm one of, maybe five that I can think of out of like hundreds
Yeah.
that are out safely to their
Mm.
biological families, just to give a little context.
And do you ever spend time with the child of your girlfriend?
Yes, I
But
am, to be
without,
clear.
like, I mean, at this point, there's no sense in defining anything, I suppose, depending
Right.
on the age of the child. But so you're in
She's
their
quite
life too.
young.
Okay.
Yes, she's quite young. She's my meta munchkin, is the term we've been using. She's wonderful. Yeah, they have decided, my girlfriend and her husband have decided to be very open with her. So I am just following their lead. I am not a co-parent, but I am very much a part of her life. She sees me as a special friend of mommy and daddy, and that she's really young. There's not a whole lot of literature around, the best ways to raise children in this way. But we're doing it, we're absorbing all the resources we can. That's something I think about a lot because family building is something I really want to pursue at some point. It does feel like we're sort of trailblazing a lot of the time,
You
which
are.
is hard. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is a perfect next segue, which is that one of the other topics you spoke about at the panel I heard you talk about was your egg freezing journey.
Yes.
Um, so before we get into sort of what that journey looked like, I guess, is marriage important to you as a general principle? And when you were coming out to yourself in terms of like, what is this going to look like in my life?
Mhm.
Did motherhood or the potential of motherhood affect sort of which direction you went? Was there fear? What was that part like for you?
Great questions. So to start with the first, is marriage important to me? That's something I don't have a solid answer on. It's something I'm exploring a lot. What I know is really important to me is celebrating the love that I have and committing to the people in my life. A lot of people, in a very stigmatized way, will hear that I'm poly or not monogamous and say, "Oh, so you're just afraid of commitment." I'm like, it's actually kind of the opposite. I'm really,
You're like
really
an
game to commit.
overcommitter.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
to multiple people. And I'm not interested in prescribed commitment. Like you are going to be with this person for the rest of your life because the government says so, because you've signed these documents. I'm not into that. So for me, if I were to get married, and it is something I think about, I would want it to be, for different reasons than that prescription. But it's still something I'm really weighing. And I think I will definitely have a wedding. It's just a matter of, how legal will this be, in the eyes of the law? What benefits are there that may outweigh my own, like, ethical ideas?
Sure.
Um, as it relates to motherhood, it's interesting. When I left the last very serious monogamous relationship I was in, I think this is kind of a common experience, just like in life, when, I was feeling a bit not suffocated by that person, but suffocated by the mono and heteronormativity that I was experiencing in that relationship. That when I left it, the pendulum almost swung in the very other direction, where I felt this freedom to rethink, unlearn, and explore. What is it that I actually want versus what is it that I've been told I should want? And so there was a period of time where I pretty severely questioned if I wanted to be a parent, because prior to that, in this monogamous relationship and before, it was something I knew I wanted. So there was a period where I was really questioning. I ended up actually working through this book. I don't love the title, but the workbook was fabulous, called Motherhood, Is It For Me? I did it with a friend. Um, I don't like the title for many reasons, but one of them being it's super gendered. I think
Yeah.
anyone of any gender, including cis men, should do that kind of work. So I didn't, it should be the parenthood,
Parenthood.
in
Yeah.
my, yeah.
Totally.
but I loved it. And it was so fascinating. And the whole purpose of the book was to acknowledge those external factors that may be weighing on you to, um, you know, maybe weighing on you or maybe influencing that decision and kind of check them at the door and get in touch with your core desire of, is this something I actually want or is it something I was spoon fed? And through that process, I was able to really sort of therapeutically assess, is this something I want to do? And the answer was yes, wholeheartedly. Yes, I want to be a parent. Now I left that process saying, I know I want to be a parent. I don't know how I'm going to meet my kids. And that is something that actually, for me, felt separate to polyamory. It felt separate to relationship status because relationship status was one of those external factors that, you should weigh, but doesn't need to necessarily be the number one reason that you may or may not have kids. So for me, I left that saying, I could imagine being a single parent by choice. I could imagine having a whole polycule raising children. I could imagine being pregnant. I could imagine not being pregnant. I could imagine being, raising kids that are not biologically connected to me. I could imagine adopting, fostering. There's so many different options. And that's where I left off many years ago. Fast forward, 5 years into being polyamory. Well, I guess 4 years into it, I got the diagnosis of diminished ovarian reserve. That I learned about backtracking a little bit. I mentioned my work with Pregnantish. We partnered with a clinic here in New York that was offering a free AMH testing day, anti-malarian hormone. I don't know if I'm pronouncing
Very
that right,
good.
but
Yes, you are.
so I went in, got tested. At the time, I was 28 when I got the diagnosis. The clinic was wonderful. They gave me a full workup, found out that I had DOR, and I kind of panicked and was like, I know that I want to have kids. I don't like the idea of closing the biological door, um, or potentially closing it when I know that if I'm even going to pursue biological kids, it's not going to be right now. It'll probably be into my 30s. So then I decided to freeze my eggs. So all that to say, the poly element of it is pretty intrinsic. I know that I'm going to have multiple partners in my life. I know that I want to raise kids. It is this big question mark of where are they going to come from? And so I think even if I didn't have DOR, freezing my eggs would have been a really appealing option, considering that third party reproduction is really highly used amongst queer relationships and poly relationships. But then, you attack on the infertility. I'm like, okay, I'm definitely going to do this.
Yeah.
So I did that last year.
And you had a good experience. Did you do one
I,
round?
I did 2 rounds. I
Two
ended up having
rounds.
to do it twice.
Okay.
I don't know what good experience really
Right.
is.
Of
It's such a
course.
hellish journey, but
Right.
I feel really grateful that I did it.
And you got some results enough that you are like, I'm not going to keep doing this right now.
Yes, after the first round, I spoke with my doctor. We were both in agreement. I was not comfortable with the amount of eggs I got, so we went for it again. And after that, decided to stop. So who knows, the quality they have. I haven't made embryos, so
Right.
there's no way to know really until we
Right.
inseminate the eggs. But yeah, that's likely not for the next few years, if at all. If I am to go down the bio route, I'll probably try naturally and
Yeah.
then
See what happens.
reconsider.
Yeah.
Hmm.
But how amazing that we have this availability now, these
Oh my
options,
gosh.
right?
Yes. 100%. Yes.
So like you said, you're in Brooklyn, you have polyamory at your fingertips all the time. You are helping so many people by talking about this to have the resources that you have and they might not. Where would someone go to find these resources if they're questioning? Where do you recommend? What do you feel like has the best tools for making some of these thoughts and decisions happen?
Great question. Well, I already kind of plugged this, but if you're considering parenthood but not sure, that book, Motherhood Is It For Me, was a wonderful place to start. Um, and then, I am not, this is completely organic. This is, I'm not paid to say this by any means, not an ad, but my work with Pregnantish completely changed my life. So I think, Pregnantish has a whole fertility curious or FC community, people who are sort of lurking in the shadows online, not necessarily taking any tangible steps towards, trying to conceive just yet. Um, I would definitely recommend people check out Pregnantish on Instagram or on the website. it was so interesting actually. I'd been working with Andrea at Pregnantish for a few years when I got the diagnosis. And so I was super well versed with, the resources that we have on the website about insurance coverage and questions you should ask your doctor, questions about the lab you should ask your clinic. I've literally wrote some of those pieces. So it was really interesting for me that when I actually got the diagnosis and it was my turn to actually be a patient, I went back on the website with a very different lens on and went
Yes.
to the search function and, bookmarked 10 different articles that I sent to my partners.
Yeah.
And I was blown away. So it's been very fulfilling in that sense as well, from a personal standpoint, to be working professionally with Pregnantish, but I can't plug Pregnantish enough. And then lastly, depending on the city that folks are in, clinics often have really wonderful, resources that are outside of the patient portal. So that was something I looked into as well in terms of, what support groups are there available, or a lot of the time clinics will have like a free webinar or a Q&A, frequently asked questions, things like that. So that was another area that I utilized and would recommend.
I love it. I always like to close, if you're willing, with some expression, saying, cliche, piece of advice, just something you think about, or maybe either you give someone else or someone else gave to you.
Oh, that's really good.
Take your time.
Um, I guess as it relates to infertility, I went and got my AMH tested on a whim. I would say if you know that having biological kids is an option you want to have, go get a workup. That is something nobody told me until I started working with Pregnantish. And I wish that I'd even learned that sooner
Mhm.
than 28. 28 is still very young, but I know plenty of people now who are younger than that who are going and checking it out. So that would be one
It's a
piece of
great
advice
one.
I would say. And as it relates to more of the, poly element or sexuality piece, if there's anyone listening who is hearing my story and saying, "Oh my gosh, that's me, but I'm terrified," you're not alone. And that voice inside you is valid, and you're safe to explore that within yourself and in other spaces, I hope.
I love it. Thank you so much. Thank you for opening your heart with us. And I can't wait to, I mean, I just know how many people you're going to help. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this platform and inviting me on. It's been great to chat.